Okay, guys, hello girls, hello boys. This is our third history class using this methodology through the computer and everything. So, I really need you to tell me if you're having any doubts because, as I am seeing, not every one of you has seen the videos, and that is worrying to me. I really want to ensure that you have all the knowledge that you should by having these classes, and I cannot ensure it if you are not having the actual classes, if you are not seeing the videos, if you are not giving me the homework. So this weekend I am going to work a lot in seeing who is actually working and who isn't, and I am going to ensure that every one of you is working. So let's start our class of today. I'm going to explain you precisely how we're going to be working, and we're going to start working in that way. So let's start over here. Uh, Remember that we said that the century is the unit of analysis of history, and we're going to go even deeper into that. But, well, many of you told me that you didn't understand this figure that I have over here, in which we have the century and it is surrounded by its characteristics. So I'm going to explain it to you again. However, that was something that we were going to repeat today, so do not worry if you didn't have it so clear in the first time, if you didn't get it quite much in the first place. So remember that we said that we can think of the century, and I proposed you this example last class, as an apple. And imagine that you have a bunch of apples. So how can you tell each apple apart? How can you tell that each apple is different from each other? That is precisely through its characteristics, because if we see this apple over here, well, it is a small apple, it is a really spherical apple, it is almost a perfect circle, can you see? And it is kind of red, kind of yellow, it has these stripes, so we can see that it has these characteristics. And if we go over here, well, this apple isn't quite red nor yellow, it is a green apple. The shape isn't quite a circle, but it is still pretty close to one. Over here we have the queen of apples, the red delicious. And this apple has the shape that we usually draw of apples. We don't usually use a perfect circle to represent an apple. We usually use this kind of shape to represent apples. And this one is of a really deep red, a really dark red. It has these spots all over its skin, like strawberry perhaps. And then over here we have a golden apple that again is smaller, it's more spherical, it is yellow, it looks quite fresh because it has all these the drops of water. So all of these are the characteristics that each one of these apple has, and we are able to tell apart each apple based on those characteristics, and the centuries will be the same. We're going to have each century, and we're going to be able to tell that they have different characteristics, and through those characteristics we're going to be able to tell each century apart from each other. We're going to be able to say that we have smaller centuries than others, we have shorter centuries, and we have bigger centuries, and we have well, we do not have red centuries, but we have, for example, centuries filled with war and centuries filled with peace, and a lot of processes that are going to be the different characteristics that are going to allow us to tell apart each century from another. And that is what we are going to be doing. So let me explain you how is that going to work. For example, over here, this is the format that I wanted us to use for this trimester. Of course, we're not going to, because this requires cards. This requires for you or your parents to go to the stationaries and buy some cards. And as I was telling you last class, I am not going to send you to buy cards, not you and not your parents either. So, but I am going to explain you how it was going to work and how we're going to adapt it to work with the possibilities that we have now that we are in this health crisis due to coronavirus. So the first idea was that you are going to have in one side of the card the particular century that we are going to be talking about. So again, I am going to use as an example the 20th century. So first I'm going to write in one side of the card 20th century, and I am going to include a drawing, an image, anything that will allow me to remember that this is the 20th century, that is going to be really representative of the 20th century. So in this case I chose the Cold War, right? So all the socialist ideologies versus America, right? And this is going to be representative of the 20th century. And this is going to be in one side of the card. And what are we going to include in the other side of the card? Well, first of all, please let me be really clear. all these rectangles that I am including over here, you are not going to draw these rectangles. You are not going to draw these rectangles. These rectangles are just for you to see that I am talking about these specific things, that I'm going to talk about the start and the end of the century. You do not have to draw these rectangles. So what are we going to do? We have the 20th century, and here we have the 20th century. And now we're going to see its characteristics. We're going to fill the information about its characteristics, the information that is going to allow us to tell one century apart from another. So what did I want us to do? And we're going to do this later. When we come back to school, I am going to require you to now, yes, buy these cards and fill the information that you're going to have in your notebooks, but now fill them in cards, because as I was telling you, we're going to be using them to play some memory games. So I ensure that you actually learn and that you actually remember what is important about every century, because that is going to allow you to really be able to have any history class at all for the rest of your life, and you're going to be prepared for it. So this is what we are going to do. First, in the top part of the card, you're going to tell me the beginning and the end of the century. It starts, for example, the 20th century. We said that it starts in 1914 with the beginning of the First World War, and it ends in 1989 when the wall of Berlin, well, the Berlin's wall starts to break down, when it starts to get some entries, some doors, and finally by 1991 it finally falls, and it is it is its end. So that is the first part, the beginning and the end of the century. Then you're going to tell me how many years in average or as a hypothesis it lasts. So its duration in this case is 75 years. So it is a short century. That is important. And afterwards, the next element that we are going to include is the transformation. What is the transformation that we are going to be seeing in this century? So the first part, the S1, and now we're going to be seeing what does S1 means and what does S2 means. But the first state of the century, the first state of things that is going to start with the century is going to be, as we were saying, empires. By the end of the 19th century, the world was divided in empires, and by the end of the 20th century, the world is going to be divided into great capitals. Remember that it is the birth and the true consolidation of capitalism is going to happen by 1989, when the socialist republics, when the socialist option is going to fail with the fall of the Berlin's Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So it starts as empires and it ends as capitals. In the beginning, empires are going to be ruling the world: the Russian Empire, the British Empire, the German Empire, and by the end, the great capitals, the great companies, the great multinational companies are going to be ruling the world. And finally, what we're going to be including in the lower part of the card, in the last part of the card, is going to be the indicators of processes, or now, yes, the main characteristics of these centuries. So in here, I only included some events, but not only events are going to be included over here. This is just an example. And I have in bold letters both the first and the last event that I am including over here, because of course they are going to be talking about the start and the end of the century. So I also require you to be really clear on that. In here, in the part of the indicators of processes or the main characteristics, I want you to really highlight what event or what characteristic is going to be talking about the start of the century. So in here it is the First World War, and the end. So in here we have the fall of the Berlin's Wall. So over here, as indicators of processes, I am including several wars that really changed the course of humanity, actually, and of the whole world. So there are indicators of all these transformations that went by through the 20th century. So the First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, the Korea's War, the Vietnam's War, the Six-Day War, and finally the fall of the Berlin's Wall. And we're going to study all of those wars and many more So we are actually able to characterize the 20th century. We're going to see the century to a lot of detail, but for now it is just an example. This is the way that we're going to be working, and that is the meaning of this scheme that you had in the last presentation about the century and its characteristics, and how we're going to be able to tell one century apart from another, as we're able to tell one apple apart from another based on their characteristics. So, as I was telling you, this model is based on the idea of using cards, but we're not going to use cards so far by now. Not now, because that would require for you or your parents to go to the stationaries, and I am not going to send you nor your parents to the stationaries. So instead of doing this that we're going to be doing by the end of the trimester, we're going to be doing this. You're going to take the page of your notebook and you're going to divide it in half, and you're going to be showing this precise same information, exactly the same information, the beginning and end, how much does it last, how many years, what are the two states that are going to be transformed. We're going from empires into capitals, and we're going to include these main indicators of processes, or these main characteristics, and that would be the first half of the page of your notebook, and then in the second part of your page you're going to go to the next century, and we're going to have this condition. This condition is very important, and that is the meaning of these S1 and S2 signs or letters, and this is the condition. Remember, and we have seen this when we were studying time, because remember that over here we're going to be studying time. We're going to be studying the doing of men in time through the centuries. That is the scale of observation, the unit of analysis. And what is that? S2, what is that condition? S2 may be a transformation of S1, but S1 may not be a transformation of S2. So this scheme would explain this to you easily. S2 may give birth, or may give as a consequence S2, but S2 may not have as a consequence S1. What is the meaning of this? The 20th century may give birth to the 21st century, but the 21st century cannot give as a result the 20th century, because this condition is called irreversibility. And remember that if it is not irreversible, then it is not time. We can only talk about time when we have irreversible conditions. So the first thing that we have to do is to ensure that we are talking correctly about a process, is really be able to ensure that this process can give us a result this other condition of the world, but this second condition of the world cannot give us a result this previous condition of the world. And that is very important, because there is a lot of people that actually think that in societies things happen again, that time can be repeated in societies, and that is absolutely false, because if things can be reversible, then we're not talking about time. The condition of time is that the 19th century is going to be have as a result the 20th century, but the 20th century cannot have as a result the 19th century. This is called the arrow of time, and it means that time can only go in one direction, and that is forward. And actually this condition is given by Greimas, and we have already studied Greimas. Do you remember when we were studying the narrative structure of the myth? The narrative structure, not the one of Levi-Strauss, but the one that is able to talk about any narrative structure. Do you remember the one that we used as an example? Batman and Robin, and the Joker and Harley Quinn. Do you remember that one? Well, that same author gave us this condition that I think that is a really nice way to put this condition about irreversibility, and that is that for example, the 5th century can give us a result the 6th century, but the 6th century cannot give us a result the 5th century.